The vast chamber of the Galactic Senate, on Nexus Prime, hummed with tension as representatives from 100 worlds gathered for an emergency session. 50 years had passed since humanity joined the galactic community, and in that time, Earth had earned both respect and suspicion for its rapid technological advancement and fierce independence. Today, that independence would be put to the ultimate test. Admiral Elena Reyes stood at her command post in the Pentagon's Galactic Affairs Division, her weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of holographic displays. At 62, she had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, though she had hoped it would never come. Across the secured channel, Ambassador Marcus Lee's voice crackled from Nexus Prime, where he sat in the Earth delegation's pod, surrounded by alien representatives, whose intentions had suddenly become frighteningly clear. "Admiral, they're calling for an immediate vote," Lee whispered urgently into his communicator. "The Velkari delegation just introduced Resolution 513Z, complete disarmament of all human military assets within 60 standard galactic days. No exceptions, no negotiations." Reyes felt her jaw clench. Through the transparent aluminum walls of her strategic command center, she could see the bustling activity of the Pentagon's night shift. Young officers scurried between workstations, their faces grave, as preliminary reports filtered in from listening posts throughout the galaxy. Something had been building for months: increased Velkari fleet movements, unexplained communication blackouts, and now this. "What's the mood in the chamber?" Reyes asked. Lee's response was delayed as he observed the alien delegates around him. The crystalline hegemony's representative, a being that resembled living gemstone, pulsed with agitated colors. The Aquatic Federation's ambassador floated in his environmental suit, tentacles writhing nervously. Most concerning were the Velkari themselves. Their reptilian features betrayed nothing, but their black eyes held a cold satisfaction that made Lee's diplomatic instincts scream warnings. "Divided," Lee finally replied. "The older species Velkari Hegemony Federation, they're pushing hard for this. But I'm seeing hesitation from newer members. The Andromedan Trade Consortium seems particularly uncomfortable. Speaker Zilmar is calling for an immediate vote, claiming humanity's weapons threaten galactic peace." Reyes pulled up tactical displays, showing human fleet positions throughout known space. Exploration vessels, research stations, defensive platforms, all of it would have to be dismantled if this resolution passed. More troubling were the intelligence reports coming in from deep space monitoring stations. Velkari battle groups were massing just outside human claim systems, their movements coordinated with surgical precision. "This isn't about peace," Reyes muttered. "This is about power. Lee, we need time. Can you stall?" "Already working on it," the ambassador replied. "I've called for a postponement pending security review. Buying us maybe 72 hours, but the Velkari delegation is furious. Speaker Zilmar is demanding an explanation for the delay." As if summoned by their conversation, President Amina Hassan's face appeared on Reyes' priority channel. The president's office had been converted into a war room, with advisors from every major government agency clustered around holographic displays, showing real-time galactic political data. Admiral Ambassador the President acknowledged both channels simultaneously. "I've been briefed on the situation. What are our options?" Reyes straightened. "Madam President, our defensive capabilities are significant, but against the combined forces of the elder species, we wouldn't last long in a direct confrontation. However, we have something they don't know about Project Aegis Echo." Lee's voice carried surprise across the channel. "Aegis Echo is operational. I thought that was theoretical research." "As of 6 months ago, we moved beyond theoretical," Reyes confirmed. "Dr. Lin Pham's team cracked the ancient merchant civilization artifacts. We've reverse-engineered their shield technology, but more importantly, we've discovered something the galactic community has forgotten or tried to hide." President Hassan leaned forward. "Explain." Reyes activated a highly classified file, causing new data streams to cascade across the displays. "The ancient merchants didn't just build shields, Madam President. They built a network. Every artifact we've found, every piece of their technology, it's all connected. And according to Dr. Pham's analysis, it only responds to human DNA. The implications hung heavy in the air. Lee was the first to speak, his diplomatic mind already working through possibilities. You're saying we have access to ancient technology that no other species can use? More than that, Reyes replied. We've been testing in secret. The artifact network creates defensive fields that make our current shields look like tissue paper. But activation requires a galactic-scale event, something that threatens human survival. President Hassan nodded slowly. And you believe the Velkhari forced disarmament qualifies? I believe the Velkhari know more about these artifacts than they're letting on, Reyes said grimly. Our intelligence indicates they've been searching for merchant ruins for decades. This resolution isn't just about disarming us, it's about forcing us to reveal our hand. Lee's voice cut through their discussion. Speaking of revealing hands, I need to inform you both of something I've just discovered. I've been approached by Ambassador Thessian of the Andromedan Trade Consortium. He claims to have evidence that the Velkhari have been manipulating smaller species' votes through economic pressure and outright threats. Reyes felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking together. That explains the coordinated timing. How many votes do they control? Enough to pass the resolution, Lee confirmed. But Thessian suggests that if we can present compelling evidence of Velkhari manipulation, several species might reconsider their positions. The problem is, we need proof they'll accept. As if on cue, Agent Orion materialized in Rhea's command center, his stealth suit disengaging with a soft shimmer. The operative looked exhausted, but triumphant as he handed her a data crystal. Fresh from Velkhari space, he announced. Communications intercepts fleet movement orders and something very interesting, architectural surveys of merchant ruins on 12 different worlds, all in human territory. Reyes inserted the crystal into her command console, scanning its contents rapidly. What she found made her blood run cold. They've been planning this for years. The disarmament resolution, the fleet movements, the economic pressure, it's all designed to force us into a position where we have to activate the artifact network. But why? President Hassan asked. Because they can't activate it themselves. Lee realized his diplomatic experience finally providing the missing piece. They need humans to do it for them. Then they plan to take control of the network. Reyes nodded grimly. Which means we're walking into a trap if we do nothing, and into a different trap if we react. But maybe there's a third option. She turned to her tactical team. Initialize Project Aegis Echo. Full activation all networks. Dr. Lin Pham's voice joined the conversation from her underground laboratory facility. The brilliant scientist had barely slept in months, pushing the boundaries of ancient technology that defied modern understanding. Admiral, full activation is still theoretical. We've managed partial field tests but galactic-scale deployment. The power requirements alone could drain our entire energy grid. Doctor, what would happen if we activated the network during the Senate session? Reyes asked. Full visual transmitted across all galactic communication channels. Dr. Pham paused, running rapid calculations. It would be unprecedented. The energy signature would be visible from anywhere in the galaxy. But Admiral, the risks are worth it, President Hassan interrupted. Dr. Pham, initiate activation sequence. Admiral Reyes, coordinate with our defensive forces. Ambassador Lee, you have until activation to set the stage. Lee nodded his mind, already working through the diplomatic complexities ahead. Understood, Madam President. But I need something to work with, evidence that will make them listen. Agent Orion stepped forward once more. Actually, sir, there's something else on that data crystal. Financial records. The Velkhari haven't just been pressuring votes, they've been buying them. Massive resource transfers to at least 15 minor species, in exchange for supporting the resolution. Lee's eyes lit up with predatory satisfaction. That's bribery by galactic law. If I can present this evidence publicly. He paused, thinking through the ramifications. I'll need to be very careful. If they realize we have this information before the vote, they might accelerate their timeline. How long do you need? Reyes asked. Give me 6 hours to work the diplomatic channels privately, then begin activation. I'll need the visual confirmation to coincide with my presentation of evidence. President Hassan nodded. Make it happen, all of you. The future of human independence, maybe. Human survival depends on the next 24 hours. As the secure channels closed, Reyes found herself alone with her thoughts for the first time in days. Through her office window, she could see the lights of Washington extending to the horizon. Somewhere out there, families were sleeping peacefully, unaware that their species' fate was being decided in a cosmic political arena billions of miles away. She activated her personal log. Admiral's log stardate 4.156.2075. We stand at a crossroads. In 18 hours, the Galactic Senate will vote on whether humanity deserves the right to defend itself. They think they know us, that we're just another young species eager to prove ourselves through violence and aggression. They're about to learn how wrong they are. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of activity. Dr. Pham's team worked frantically to calibrate the artifact network, while Agent Orion's intelligence operatives confirmed the positioning of hidden Velkari battle groups. Meanwhile, Lee moved through Nexus Prime's diplomatic quarter like a master chess player, arranging private meetings with wavering delegates and carefully planting seeds of doubt about Velkari motivations. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Kethvar of the Insectoid Collective, a species that had remained neutral in galactic politics for centuries, approached Lee with disturbing information. Your species interests us, Kethvar clicked in his mechanical translation device. The Velkari promised our collective exclusive mineral rights to your system's asteroid belt if we supported the resolution. They seem very confident of its passage. Lai maintained his diplomatic composure, even as his mind raced. And how did you respond to their offer? We declined. The collective has no desire for conflict, but we are curious. Why would the Velkari be so certain of gaining access to human territory? Lee smiled grimly. Perhaps that's a question worth raising during tomorrow's session. As the countdown to activation reached its final hours, Lee prepared for what might be the most important speech of his career. The evidence was compelling, but he knew that in the arena of galactic politics, facts alone weren't enough. He needed to tell a story that resonated with dozens of different species, each with their own values and motivations. Back on Earth, Admiral Reyes stood in the command center that would coordinate humanity's greatest gamble. Dr. Pham had arrived personally to oversee the activation, her usual lab attire replaced by a military uniform that looked uncomfortable on her slight frame. Final systems check, Reyes announced to the assembled team. All stations report readiness. Artifact network is synchronized, Dr. Pham reported. Power grid at maximum capacity. Energy collectors are drawing from every source we have. Solar arrays, fusion plants, even the experimental antimatter generators. Fleet positions confirmed, reported Admiral Chen's replacement, Admiral Torres. All human vessels are standing by in defensive formations. Intelligence networks maintaining surveillance on Velkari fleet movements. Agent Orion confirmed. They're moving into position, Admiral. Whatever they're planning, they expect to make their move immediately after the vote. Reyes nodded. Then we'll be ready for them. She opened a channel to Lee on Nexus Prime. Ambassador, are you prepared? Lee's face appeared on the main screen, and behind him, Reyes could see the massive chamber of the Galactic Senate, filling with representatives. The Velkari delegation had taken prominent seats near the speaker's podium, their confidence radiating across the chamber. As ready as I'll ever be, Lee replied. Speaker Zilmar is preparing to call for the vote. I've managed to secure 5 minutes to present our position, but that's all they'll give me. 5 minutes to save humanity, Reyes mused. No pressure. Actually, Lee said with a slight smile, I've come to enjoy pressure. It clarifies things wonderfully. President Hassan's face joined the communication link, broadcasting from the Situation Room, where she'd remained throughout the crisis. Ambassador Lee Admiral Reyes, you have the full support of every human on Earth and beyond. Make us proud. The chamber on Nexus Prime had filled completely with over 200 species, represented in a stunning display of galactic diversity. Speaker Zilmar, his reptilian features imposing beneath the ancient, ceremonial robes of his office, called the session to order. Honorable delegates. Zilmar's voice resonated through translation devices in dozens of languages. We gather today to address a threat to galactic peace that can no longer be ignored. The human species, despite their brief membership in our community, has amassed military capabilities that could destabilize the delicate balance maintained for millennia. Lee felt his diplomatic training take over, suppressing the anger that rose at Zilmar's words. The Velkhari speaker continued his presentation, displaying holographic images of human military installations and fleet deployments, carefully framed to make them appear as aggressive as possible. Resolution 5130Z requires the immediate disarmament of all human military assets, Zilmar proclaimed. This is not punishment, it is protection. Protection for all species, including humanity itself, from the dangers of unchecked military expansion. A murmur went through the assembly. Lee noted which species seemed supportive, and which appeared uncomfortable with the proposal. His diplomatic instincts, honed over decades of negotiation, told him the vote was closer than Zilmar expected. The chair recognizes Ambassador Lee of Earth, Zilmar announced with poorly concealed distaste. Lee rose slowly, activating his own holographic display system. Thank you, Speaker Zilmar. Honorable delegates, I stand before you today, not to deny our military preparations, but to explain their necessity and to reveal why Resolution 513Z is not what it appears to be. He began with recent history, reminding the Assembly of humanity's contributions to galactic society, technological innovations, shared freely diplomatic missions that had resolved conflicts between older species, scientific discoveries that had benefited all. Then, he turned to the evidence. Speaker Zilmar speaks of threats to galactic peace, Lee continued, but I ask you to consider who truly threatens that peace. He activated displays showing intercepted communications, financial records, and fleet movements. For the past 18 months, the Velkhari Confederation has systematically pressured, bribed, and threatened smaller species to support this resolution. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Several delegations activated their own displays, clearly cross-referencing Lee's evidence with their own records. Zilmar's reptilian features darkened with rage. These accusations are, Zilmar began, verifiable. Lee interrupted a breach of protocol that sent shocked whispers through the assembly. Ambassador Kethvar of the Insectoid Collective, would you care to share what the Velkhari offered your people in exchange for your vote? All eyes turned to Kethvar, whose insectoid features betrayed no emotion, but whose mechanical translator conveyed clear indignation. The Velkhari delegation promised my collective exclusive mineral rights to human territory, assuming passage of this resolution. They exhibited disturbing confidence in both the vote's outcome and their ability to enforce its terms. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted questions in dozens of languages, while translation systems struggled to keep pace. Zilmar called for order, but Lee pressed his advantage. Honorable delegates, ask yourselves, why does the Velkhari Confederation offer territory they don't control? Why do their fleets mass on our borders? Why do they demand we disarm while they mobilize for war? Lee paused, allowing his words to sink in. Then he delivered his final revelation. Because they know something about humanity that we've only recently discovered ourselves. Something that threatens their ambitions for galactic dominance. On Earth, Admiral Reyes watched the proceedings with growing tension. Lee was performing magnificently, but she could see Velkhari military attachés communicating urgently with their fleets. The timing would have to be perfect. Dr. Pham, she said quietly, begin activation sequence. Dr. Pham's fingers danced across her control interface, initiating the most complex technological procedure in human history. Around the world, ancient artifacts that had puzzled archaeologists for decades began to pulse with inner light. In deep space, human research stations monitoring merchant ruins reported unprecedented energy readings. Lai continued his presentation, now revealing the discovery of the ancient merchant civilization and their technology. For months, we have studied artifacts left by this vanished race. We believed them to be simple defensive tools, until 3 days ago when we made a startling discovery. The chamber had gone silent, every delegate focused on Li's words. Even Zilmar seemed caught off guard by this revelation. The merchant artifacts form a network, Li announced. A defensive network of unimaginable scope and power. And this network responds only to human genetic markers. The implications rippled through the assembly like shockwaves. Species that had dismissed humanity as newcomers suddenly saw them in a very different light. Ancient powers that had shaped galactic civilization for millennia faced the reality that they had been excluded from their greatest achievement. Zilmar found his voice. Even if true, this only confirms the threat humanity poses. Such power, in the hands of a militaristic species, could protect the galaxy, Li countered, as we intend to demonstrate. This was the moment. Li gave the signal a simple gesture that activated transmitters throughout Nexus Prime. Admiral Reyes received confirmation and nodded to Dr. Pham. Execute Aegis Echo. Across human space, ancient artifacts that had lain dormant for millions of years awakened simultaneously. Energy pathways carved into asteroid belts and moon surfaces blazed with light visible from neighboring systems. On Earth, every merchant site from the Sahara to the Antarctic became a beacon of power. And in the center of the solar system, space itself seemed to fold as an enormous energy field materialized around the Sun. The field expanded rapidly, encompassing Mercury, then Venus, then Earth itself. Within minutes, a gossamer sphere of light stretched beyond Mars, containing the entire human home system, in a protective barrier that shimmered with impossible energies. The image was broadcast live to every corner of the galaxy, displayed on screens throughout Nexus Prime for all delegates to witness. The chamber fell silent as representatives of ancient civilizations watched a young species accomplish something no one had achieved for millions of years. "Magnificent," whispered Ambassador Thessian of the Andromedans. The crystalline representative of the hegemony pulsed with colors never seen before, indicating emotions for which no translation existed. Aquatic Federation delegates floated motionless in their tanks, tentacles curled in what their species recognized as awe. Li allowed the moment to stretch before speaking again. "This is the Aegis Echo Field," he announced. "Powered by ancient merchant technology that recognizes humanity as the inheritors of their legacy. It cannot be used for aggression, only defense. And it cannot be controlled by any species other than our own." Zilmar had gone completely still, his black eyes fixed on the displays, showing the impossible barrier. When he spoke, his voice carried a tremor of what might have been fear. You knew. You knew they would respond to your species." Li shook his head. "We discovered it by accident. But you, the Velkari, you've been searching for merchant ruins for decades. You knew this technology existed. You knew it might activate. That's why you wanted us disarmed, not to protect galactic peace, but to force us to reveal this capability, so you could take it for yourselves." The accusation hung in the air like a physical weight. Across the chamber, delegates began connecting the pieces, understanding the true scope of Velkari ambitions. Several smaller species representatives activated their communication devices, clearly reporting back to their home governments. Zilmar seemed to recover some of his composure. "Even so, such power concentrated in one species will be shared," Li interrupted. "President Hassan has authorized me to announce the Terra Accord. Any species that signs will receive protection under the Aegis system in exchange for mutual defense agreements and shared technological advancement." The age of monopolized power ends today. The chamber erupted again, but this time with excitement, rather than outrage. Representatives shouted questions about the Accord's terms, while others demanded immediate private consultations with the human delegation. Ambassador Kethvar was among the first to speak publicly. The Insectoid Collective formally requests inclusion in the Terra Accord. He announced his mechanical translator, somehow conveying satisfaction. Others quickly followed. The Andromedan Trade Consortium, 3 separate research-focused species, even some members of the Aquatic Federation, expressed immediate interest. The tide had turned completely. Speaker Zilmar called for order, but his authority had evaporated. The revelation of Velkari manipulation combined with humanity's demonstration of both power and restraint had fundamentally altered the political landscape of the galaxy. I call for an immediate vote on Resolution 513Z, Zilmar declared, perhaps hoping to salvage something from the disaster. Lee smiled. As is your prerogative, Speaker Zilmar. Earth stands ready for that vote. The electronic voting system engaged its displays, visible throughout the chamber. For the first time in galactic history, every delegate could watch in real time as votes were cast and tallied. Opposition to Resolution 513Z 147 votes. Support for Resolution 513Z 23 votes. Abstentions 31 votes. The resolution failed by the widest margin in Senate history. More significantly, 17 species immediately introduced their own resolution recognizing Earth as a guardian of galactic peace and calling for the establishment of formal Terra Accord negotiations. That resolution passed 156 to 8. As celebrating erupted throughout Nexus Prime, Lee felt exhaustion finally creeping in. He had done it, not just saved humanity from forced disarmament, but potentially reshaped the galaxy's political structure. Back on Earth, Admiral Reyes watched the vote tallies with quiet satisfaction. Around her, the Pentagon's command center buzzed with relieved activity as personnel began standing down from high alert. Dr. Pham looked up from her control station, wonder evident in her expression. Admiral, the energy readings from the artifact network, they're not diminishing. The field is self-sustaining now. It's as if the technology has been waiting millions of years for this moment. Perhaps it has, Reyes mused. Perhaps the merchants knew that someday a young species would need their protection. President Hassan's voice carried over the communication system, addressing her military and diplomatic teams. Ladies and gentlemen, today, you have not just protected our planet. You have secured humanity's place in galactic civilization for generations to come. The universe just became a much smaller place, and we're no longer alone in our corner of it. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Senate had devolved into dozens of smaller meetings as species representatives negotiated potential Accord memberships and alliances. Lee found himself surrounded by ambassadors, all eager to establish the formal diplomatic relationships that would define the coming era. But perhaps the most significant moment came when Ambassador Thessian approached him privately. The elderly Andromedan's expression carried both respect and curiosity. Ambassador Lee. Thessian said quietly, my people have been spacefaring for 60,000 years. We have witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. But what your species accomplished today, it suggests possibilities none of us had considered. Lee nodded thoughtfully. The universe is larger than any of us imagined, Ambassador Thessian. Perhaps it's time we explored it together. As the immediate crisis subsided, reports began filtering in of Velkari fleet withdrawals. Faced with impossible odds and their political strategy in ruins, the Confederation had little choice but to retreat to their home systems. Some analysts predicted civil war within the Velkari government. Others believed they would eventually seek accommodation with the new galactic order. Dr. Pham's research teams worked around the clock to understand the full implications of the activated artifact network. Early analysis suggested that the merchant civilization had been far more advanced than previously believed, and that the defensive barrier was only one aspect of their legacy. Weeks later, as the Terra Accord negotiations proceeded on Nexus Prime, Lee and Reyes found themselves in unprecedented positions. Lee led humanity's first true galactic diplomatic mission, while Reyes became the de facto commander of an interspecies defense network that spanned dozens of systems. The Aegis Echo Field had become more than just Earth's shield. It was a symbol of a new age of cooperation. Species that had warred for millennia found themselves working together under its protection, sharing knowledge and resources in ways that would have been impossible just months before. Standing in the observation deck of the newly constructed Terra station orbiting Earth's moon, Lee watched ships from dozens of worlds arriving for the formal accord signing ceremony. Each carried delegates, researchers, and cultural ambassadors, eager to be part of this new chapter in galactic history. Admiral Reyes joined him at the observation window, both still adjusting to their expanded roles in this transformed universe. "Do you ever wonder what the merchants would think of all this?" Reyes asked, watching a crystalline hegemony vessel dock with extraordinary grace. Lai considered the question. "I think they'd be pleased. They built this network not just to protect but to unite, and that's exactly what it's doing." As if in response to his words, the Aegis Echo Field pulsed gently around Earth, below its light visible even to the naked eye, as a faint aurora in the planet's upper atmosphere. It had become humanity's greatest achievement and the galaxy's newest hope, proof that even the youngest species could become guardians of peace. The vote to disarm humanity had failed spectacularly, but in that failure, something far greater had been born. The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity had earned its place not through conquest, but through the courage to protect others as fiercely as they protected themselves. The Galactic Senate had tried to disarm humanity, but Earth's response had left them speechless and united in ways no one had thought possible. In the end, the greatest weapon proved to be the willingness to turn swords into shields and to share those shields with any who would stand for peace. As Lee liked to tell the story in later years, when young diplomats asked about the day that changed everything, "They came to take our weapons, and we gave them our protection instead." Sometimes the most powerful response is the one no one expects. The age of the Terra Accord had begun, and with it, a new chapter in the story of galactic civilization, one in which humanity stood not as conquerors, but as the guardians of something far more precious than any weapon, the hope that different species working together could create a future none of them could achieve alone.